It's been 2 weeks since Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire, since the hostages were returned, and still there seems to be fighting going on. People are still dying. Israel is still getting blamed for it by the same people who have been blaming Israel for everything. Why do people seem to hate Israel so much and almost seem defensive of Hamas? I thought I'd take a stab at answering that question because, funnily enough, I think that the answer to it could lie in my Instagram comments. Welcome to the best video you've ever seen in your life from a New Zealander about the Israel-Palestine conflict. So it all started for me about 4 weeks ago when I posted a video sharing the news that the New Zealand government, the country that I'm from, had refused to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN. I called this a victory for reason and for logic, and actually quite impressive just given how much propaganda had saturated the Western media landscape and had dominated people's minds and had led them to form such negative views of Israel and almost positive or at least defensive views of Hamas. Upon posting this video, I immediately received some comments, including from old friends, saying, you know, how disgraceful I was being and how much I had, you know, fallen away and that kind of stuff. And also received some comments from people I didn't know, such as Mimi03, who posted, "Impressive Hamas propaganda? You need to educate yourself before making a video. Learn history from point A to Z." That's important, remember that. Before making stuff up, start with the Balfour Declaration, free Palestine. So the first thing to mention is that it's funny to me that the substance of her comment is telling me to learn more, to think more, but then she ends it with a slogan which is basically designed to shut down critical thought about a complex issue and just make sure that everyone is thinking the same thing, free Palestine, on the lowest level of analysis possible. So I replied to Mimi03, "This is obviously a very complex topic and we could all learn more about it, but I have learned enough about it at this point, starting with long before Arthur Balfour's letter, why start there, to draw a few confident conclusions, certainly regarding the propaganda aspect to it that the combatants and their supporters have been using to manipulate public opinion. That may be something to consider if you hadn't thought about whether you're susceptible to that kind of manipulation as well, as are we all." So the first thing that I really want to point out is that she says, learn history from point A to Z, and then immediately afterwards she says, start with the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration is not exactly point A. That's something along the lines of point V or point W. It's certainly not point A. But I think that gives a little bit of a clue that a lot of people who share her opinion, a lot of them appeal to history as a justification for those views, but they have a certain cutoff point at which they're considering history. She replies to me, "If you're talking about Judea and all that BS, your argument is invalid. Nations come and go, civilizations start and end. If we use your logic, New Zealand should not be New Zealand, it's Maoris. Balfour promised a land that was not his, nor the Jews who are 100% Europeans back in the day." So already I was noticing some holes in her facts and in her logic. So I replied to her, "It seems like you're picking and choosing the logic you want to apply to this situation. Israeli Jews are not all European. They're a mix of Mizrahi, Sephardi, Middle Eastern Jews, Ashkenazi, the ones who lived in Europe for hundreds of years, and Ethiopian, so quite multi-ethnic." Did she acknowledge that? No, she didn't. "The first Zionists are Europeans," she says. "Plus, you said yourself they are from everywhere but Palestine. Go to the West Bank or Gaza and ask them what's their background. All they're going to tell you is Palestine. Unlike Israelis, they are not the indigenous to that land." She also commented separately on my video, "The fact that they are recognizing a state that is already supposed to exist is annoying." I replied to her, "I understand that it may be annoying, but the fact is that Palestine has no effective governance, and the people who are the de facto government, Hamas, wish to kill all the people right next door who are a multi-ethnic democracy. As Winston Peters, who's our foreign minister, said, no state anywhere could be recognized under these conditions." Mimi03 replies, "Multi-ethnic democracy? Lol. More than 60% of Israelis served in the IDF. Okay? It's not exactly on topic. All I see is a military settlement and religious delusional settlers who have no business being in the Middle East. At this point, I started to really realize that her logic was not only flawed, but it could actually be used to undermine her own position. So I said to her, did the Arabs have any business being in the Middle East when they originally conquered it? Were those people military and religious settlers or something else? When was the cutoff line for legitimate presence there, meaning in the areas of the Middle East that the Arabs conquered? Mimeo3 replies, Arabs have been nowhere further than the Middle East. It's their land. I wanted to be polite, so I commented back to her, I hate to break it to you, but Arabs are from Arabia. Starting in the 7th century, they conquered all the way to France in the west and to Afghanistan in the east, creating the largest empire that the world had ever seen. They occupied Spain for centuries, and the only reason they didn't conquer Paris and onwards into Europe was because Charles the Hammer, who was the grandfather of Charlemagne, defeated them at the Battle of Poitiers. You know those countries we typically think of as Arab countries? Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Tunisia, etc. They were all originally Christian countries conquered by Muslims from Arabia. And what did Mimi03 reply, you ask? I hate to break it to you, but Arabia is the biggest part of the Middle East. I don't think that she's saying that because Arabia is geographically large, it should be permitted to conquer all of the regions around it. I don't think that's what she's saying. I think she actually didn't know that the Middle East was not all originally Arabic. I think that she had no idea that Spain was conquered by the Arabs and that they tried to conquer Paris over 1,000 years ago. I think that she had no idea that those conquests were the reason why Islam was spread so far over the known world at the time. I think that she's just nitpicking my wording to cover up that. It brings to mind a concept that Gad Saad talks about often, which is epistemic humility. I really like this concept because, there's so much information out there and there's limitations on what we can know. And it's good to participate in, political discussions and to seek out information. But it's important to do so always keeping in mind that you don't know everything and that you're going to be wrong about some things, and that the more you learn, the more you should change your opinion in order to fit the facts more as you learn more facts. And importantly, to be able to acknowledge that, not just to other people, but to yourself. And that is not what I see here. Maybe she's done that before in the past, been able to admit that she's wrong, but she didn't manage to do it here. So on the one hand, I want to say that the reason why people hate Israel so much is because they don't know enough history. Mimeo3 suggested to me, myself, that I needed to learn history from point A to Z, whereas she herself demonstrated that she didn't know that history that she encouraged me to learn. I think that if people sharing her views knew a little bit more about the history of Islam and the history of the Middle East, the history of the Israel-Palestine area, that they would come to different conclusions. But I think that she sadly formed her opinion too early, before learning enough, and at the same time is not responsive or flexible or epistemologically humble enough to change her view when more information comes. So I guess that's the point of this video, is to say it's always worth learning more. It's always worth carrying the idea with you that you're going to be wrong about stuff, and that as more information comes, you should be able to let go of ideas you were wrong about and not be too proud to admit that you were wrong, and adopt different opinions that are more in line with the evidence as it emerges. We've known this, for thousands of years. Plato says in, the earliest philosophy that we have recorded, some of the earliest philosophy in the Western canon, that the first steps towards wisdom are admitting your own ignorance. It's a kind of paradox that I think that everyone should be embodying. Hopefully this conflict in the Middle East is going to come to an end soon. There have been positive steps So praying for that. I hope that by sharing these facts with her, that I was able to sway her opinion a little bit, even if she couldn't admit it in this conversation we had. So Mimi, I hope that you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. You're welcome to comment on my videos anytime, and we'll have another great chat.